Imagine, just for a second, that you were born during the actual Renaissance, and you're still alive today. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're unpacking a massive, absolutely mind-bending what-if scenario that pretty much flips our entire understanding of reality. We're looking at what happens if we extended the human lifespan to a staggering 5 centuries. I mean, what if the timeline of your existence wasn't measured in decades, but in hundreds of years? It's a fascinating journey, and it forces us to question absolutely everything we know about how we live, how we love, and how our world functions. So let's just get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Think about the milestones we celebrate right now. You know, turning 18, hitting 30, that dreaded 40th birthday. Now, I want you to imagine delaying that classic midlife crisis. You know, buying the flashy sports car, totally changing your wardrobe, until you're blowing out 250 candles on a birthday cake, which, let's be honest, is a massive fire hazard in itself. It sounds like complete science fiction, right? But looking at this radically alters how we perceive the everyday pacing of our lives. If you literally have 500 years to figure things out, that crushing pressure to have your entire life perfectly sorted by age 30, it completely vanishes.
But to really grasp this thought experiment, we have to realize that just tacking on an extra 400 years of old age is definitely not the goal here. We're not talking about sitting frail on a rocking chair for 4 centuries. No way. We're talking about reimagining human existence from the ground up. And that means we have to completely rethink human biology, the structure of our societies, and even our most deeply held personal purposes. Everything, from how we build our cities to how we define a life well lived, has to be completely thrown out the window and redesigned.
So let's look at how this new timeline actually stretches out. In our standard 80-year life, everything happens so incredibly fast. But in this new reality, well, childhood and physical maturation might still happen over those first 2 decades. But get this, by year 150, you aren't elderly. You're essentially just entering early adulthood. You might just be settling into your first permanent home. Year 250? That's your midlife point, maybe a time for some deep reflection on your first couple of centuries. And year 500 is that distant twilight. The sheer volume of time between these milestones is just staggering. It literally forces us to totally recalibrate our whole concept of patience. But honestly, to even reach that 150-year mark, let alone 500, we have to face the physical reality. Like, what must actually change inside us to survive for 5 centuries? Because right now, the biological limits of the human body pretty much max out around 100 to 120 years, and that's under the absolute best, most pristine conditions. Our organic machinery just isn't designed to run for half a millennium without a total catastrophic breakdown. We essentially have an expiration date hard-coded into our DNA. So, the crucial point is that our biology needs a total, absolute overhaul. First off, we need perfect cellular regeneration to literally stop aging in its tracks and prevent diseases like cancer from ever taking hold. Second, think about your knees and hips for a second. Our current joints are absolutely not rated for 500 years of walking, running, and jumping. They need to be practically indestructible. And finally, our brains. We would need a massive upgrade in cognitive capacity. Right now, scientists estimate the human brain can hold about 2.5 million gigabytes of data. But to store, organize, and actually recall 500 years of memories without our neural hard drives getting full or corrupted, we'd need biological supercomputers in our skulls. Basically, to clear this biological hurdle, the human body has to evolve from a temporary, somewhat fragile vessel into a long-term fortress. A 500-year life isn't just about the mathematical extension of time, right? It's about being physically and mentally durable enough to actually enjoy it. If medical science actually gave us this longevity, it would mean we've conquered frailty itself. We'd be turning the human form into a sustainable, self-repairing marvel of biology that can withstand centuries of wear and tear. So, assuming our biological fortress holds up perfectly, let's shift our focus outward a bit to the social sphere. How do we actually manage relationships, families, and work on such an extreme, stretched-out timeline? Because it's not just our bodies that would need an upgrade here. The very fabric of our society is currently calibrated for an 80-year cycle. Every law, every institution, every social norm we have, it's all based on the underlying assumption that we're going to be gone in less than a century. Think about how we view commitment. Today, marriage is often framed as till death do us part, which, practically speaking, means a commitment of maybe 40 to 60 years. But in a 500-year life, enduring someone's annoying chewing habits for 450 years is a pretty tall order. I mean, is it realistic to expect 2 people to grow and evolve perfectly in sync for that long? Probably not.
Instead, we might actually see the rise of century-long relationship contracts. A couple might commit to 100 years together, raise a few generations of kids, and then amicably part ways to experience completely new lives and new partnerships for their next centuries. And just as relationships would change, so would our professional lives. Right now, the standard path is you go to school, work a single 40-year career, and then you retire. But working a single job, say being an accountant or a baker, for 400 years? That is mathematically and mentally impossible. The norm would have to shift to having 5, 6, or even 7 distinct 80-year careers in entirely different fields over the course of your lifetime. You could literally spend your first century as a software engineer, your second as an architect, and your third century as a deep-sea marine biologist. To really put this into perspective, imagine playing the exact same video game, the exact same level, with no new updates every single day for 10 straight years. You would absolutely lose your mind from boredom, right? Well, that's exactly why doing the exact same work task for centuries would become totally unbearable for the human brain. We naturally crave novelty, variety, and new challenges. Our society would have to structurally accommodate massive, periodic shifts in our life's direction just to keep us all engaged and sane.
Let's move 2 and see how this builds into an entirely new economic cycle. Step 1, you learn and train. Step 2, you work a robust 80-year career in that specific field. But step 3 is where it gets absolutely wild. You take a century-long sabbatical. Imagine having 100 years of purely free time just to travel the globe, make art, or just completely relax. Then, step 4, you completely reskill for a brand new era and start the whole cycle over. Honestly, this would be the only way to keep the global economy moving and keep individuals from burning out.
Now that sounds like an absolute utopia for the individual, right? But let's zoom out to the global scale. What happens to the planet when nobody naturally retires out of the system, and more importantly, nobody leaves? If people are constantly being born, but people aren't dying for 500 years, we are looking at massive spatial, logistical, and environmental consequences. Imagine the sheer claustrophobia of a world where generations just stack up indefinitely. Where does everyone live? Where does all the new housing go?
I want to just pause on this number for a moment. 500. Beyond just being a measurement of age, this number represents 500 years of continuous, uninterrupted resource consumption. Think about that. That is 5 centuries of one single person requiring fresh water, food, housing, electricity, and transportation, all before they finally make room for the next generation. The environmental footprint of a single human life would multiply exponentially, creating unprecedented demands on our ecosystems.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how terrifying that exponential strain would be. The resource demand of a normal 80-year lifespan is just a tiny drop in the bucket compared to what a 500-year lifespan requires. If the population never naturally cycles out, Earth's carrying capacity would entirely buckle under the weight. We would need absolutely radical, almost magical advancements in green energy, synthetic food production, and maybe even space colonization just to sustain a population of half-millennials without completely stripping the Earth bare.
So okay, we've looked at the biology and the planetary strain, but let's contract the narrative back inward to the human mind. If you actually possess this almost infinite amount of time, what would the psychological weight really feel like? This is perhaps the most profound question we face in this entire scenario. Would life feel deeply, beautifully meaningful, or would it eventually become unbearably, torturously boring?
It's a really heavy scale to balance. On one side, you have the potential for a deeply meaningful existence. You'd have the time for endless learning. You could literally master the violin, become an astrophysicist, learn 10 languages, and still have time to become a world-class chef. But on the flip side, there's the risk of extreme boredom. One of the main reasons we strive to achieve things today is because we know our time is short. Death provides a deadline, right? It's the ultimate motivator. If nothing is urgent and you always have next century to write that book or start that business, people might just lose their drive, their ambition, and their motivation entirely.
And this drives home a really fascinating psychological reality. As much as we talk about biology and society, the ultimate challenge isn't surviving 500 years, it's actually wanting to. A 500-year-old mind must constantly find new, evolving ways to stay curious and engaged. It would require immense mental discipline to avoid a deep, crushing existential dread that could set in after experiencing literally everything the world has to offer 3 or 4 times over. You would have to aggressively cultivate passion century after century.
So when we take a step back and look at the whole picture, the biological overhauls, the massive societal upheaval, the planetary strain, and the sheer psychological weight of endless time, it leaves us with one incredibly provocative question. Is living 500 years a gift or a curse?
If this superpower were offered to you tomorrow, knowing everything we just covered, would you actually take it? Food for thought, right? Thanks for exploring this with me today. Keep wondering and keep learning.